Within the grand halls of the obsidian castle, Queen Diana reigns supreme. Her emerald eyes, as sharp as a dragon's claws, strike fear into the hearts of her enemies. Clad in crimson robes, the color of spilled blood, she is known throughout the land as the Dragon Queen. Her fiery temper and ruthless pursuit of descent are legendary. But beneath this hardened exterior lies a complex woman. A devoted wife, she stands steadfast beside her king, her loyalty unwavering. Within the nursery walls, she transforms into a loving mother, her touch, a soothing balm to her children. Here, amidst the laughter and lullabies, a different Diana emerges, one who yearns for a kinder kingdom. However, whispers of rebel lion begin to snake through the land, fueled by the king's increasingly tyrannical rule. When a young knight dares to defy his decrees, Diana's wrath is swift and unforgiving. Yet, a seed of doubt is sown within her. Is blind obedience truly the path to prosperity? As a neighboring kingdom extends a veiled offer of alliance, Diana's suspicions ignite. Her sharp mind recognizes the deception, but the king, blinded by ambition, welcomes the supposed partnership with open arms. Suddenly, the kingdom finds itself embroiled in a devastating war, the result of the king's naivety. With the flames of conflict licking at the castle walls, Diana is forced to confront a critical choice. Will she remain the Dragon Queen, feared by all, or will she rise to defend her home and family, her loyalty shifting towards the greater good? Diana the Dragon is a captivating tale of a woman trapped in a web of conflicting emotions. It's a story of fierce loyalty, agonizing doubts, and the courage to stand up for what's right, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Prepare to be swept away by a tale of intrigue, suspense, and a queen who is far more than the fearsome legend she has become. Diana the Dragon, where loyalty and cruelty clash, written and published by the Zillion Pro, Chapter 1. The icy wind howled like a banshee, carrying with it the stench of the approaching blizzard. It mirrored the chill that emanated from Queen Diana as she strode through the echoing halls of Obsidian Castle. Her crimson robes, the color of dried blood and the sigil of her power, billowed behind her like a predatory dragon's wings. Two guards, clad in obsidian armor that gleamed faintly in the torchlight, flanked her. Their faces were grim, for they knew their destination, the dank dungeons that lay beneath the castle's foundations. Whispers followed them like phantoms. The Dragon Queen approaches. They scurried through the shadowed corners, laced with a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. Diana, however, ignored the murmurs. Her emerald eyes, usually glinting with a fierce intelligence, were narrowed in cold fury. Betrayal, a word as bitter as the winter wind, gnawed at her. Sir Gareth, a young knight who had served the king with unwavering loyalty for a decade, had dared to question the latest royal decree. It wasn't the decree itself, a tax increase to fund the ever-expanding army, that had sparked his defiance. It was the sheer cruelty of the methods employed to collect it. Public floggings, the seizure of meager crops, the imprisonment of those who couldn't pay, all sanctioned by the king in his insatiable hunger for power. Gareth's act of defiance, however, was seen as rebel lion. He had been stripped of his knighthood, his armor confiscated, and left to languish in the dungeons for a week. Now, the queen herself was coming to pronounce his sentence. The descent into the dungeons was a nauseating experience. The air grew thick with the stench of mildew, sweat, and decay. Rough-hewn torches sputtered on the damp walls, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the uneven floor. With each step, the temperature dropped further, biting at Diana's exposed skin. Finally, they reached the cell. A single, flickering torch illuminated a bare stone chamber. In the center, huddled on a pile of rotting straw, sat Sir Gareth. His once proud knightly bearing was gone, replaced by a gaunt figure with haunted eyes and a ragged beard. Despite the grime, a glint of defiance still flickered in his gaze. Diana stopped before the cell, her crimson robes pooling around her like a venomous flower. The guards remained a respectful distance behind, their silence as heavy as the stone walls. For a long moment, Diana stared at Gareth, a silent tempest brewing within her. Sir Gareth, her voice was a low growl, laced with the bite of winter frost. You stand accused of treason against the crown. Gareth lifted his chin, a flicker of pride momentarily chasing away the despair in his eyes. Your Majesty, he rasped, his voice hoarse from disuse, I spoke only the truth. The king's new taxes are a burden the people cannot bear. Diana's lips curled into a snarl, revealing a flash of white teeth. Truth, your truth. You question the king's wisdom? You dare defy his will? The king's will and the good of the kingdom are not always the same, your majesty, Gareth retorted, his voice gaining strength with every word. The people are suffering. Their loyalty is stretched thin. A flicker of something akin to pain crossed Diana's face. She knew Gareth spoke the truth. The whispers of discontent had reached her ears as well, carried on the very wind that now howled around the castle. Yet, to admit it, even to herself, was a dangerous path. Taking a deep breath, she forced her features back into a mask of icy indifference. Your defiance has consequences, Sir Gareth. The king has decreed. She paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. Gareth closed his eyes, bracing himself for what he knew was coming. Death, Diana finally pronounced, the word falling into the dungeon like a death knell. Gareth's eyes snapped open, a flicker of surprise crossing them. Death? Yes, death, Diana repeated, her voice devoid of emotion. By public execution, a week from today. Let it serve as a lesson to all who dare defy the king's will. With a swish of her crimson robes, Diana turned and began to walk away. At the cell door, she paused and looked back at Gareth. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met. In Gareth's gaze, Diana saw not fear, but a quiet acceptance and submission to fate. Chapter 2. The execution decree hung heavy in the air, a dark cloud even within the sun-drenched confines of the royal nursery. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting vibrant hues across the plush carpets and a mountain of toys scattered around the room. Laughter, however, was conspicuously absent. Queen Diana sat on a low stool, her crimson robes replaced by a softer, sapphire blue dress. In her arms, nestled against her chest, was Prince Edric, her youngest son. His fair hair, the color of spun gold, contrasted sharply with his mother's emerald eyes. In his hand, he clutched a stuffed dragon, its emerald scales mimicking Diana's own. Despite the weight of the day's events, Diana forced a smile as she hummed a lullaby, her voice soft and soothing. It was a melody she had composed herself, a lullaby of valiant knights and fierce dragons, where bravery and loyalty were rewarded. Prince Edric, barely 3 years old, listened intently, his large blue eyes mirroring his mother's. He loved these lullabies, the stories of courage and heroism that transported him to fantastical realms. They were a stark contrast to the harsh realities that often permeated the castle walls. A faint clatter of metal armor interrupted the lullaby. Diana glanced up to see Tryphena, her loyal handmaiden, standing at the doorway. Tryphena's brow was furrowed, a worried expression etched on her face. "Your Majesty," she began hesitantly, "the king requests your presence in the grand hall. Foreign dignitaries have arrived." Diana's smile faltered. The timing couldn't be worse. She was far from ready to face the pomp and ceremony of court after the events of the morning. Yet, she knew neglecting the king's summons wouldn't be wise. "Tell him I will be there shortly," Diana instructed, her voice flat. Tryphena bowed and retreated, leaving Diana alone with her thoughts. She looked down at Edric, who had drifted off to sleep, his face peaceful. A pang of guilt twisted in her gut. How could she be a fierce dragon queen, feared by her enemies, yet struggle to reconcile the harsh realities of her world with the gentle lullaby she sang to her children? Pushing the troubling thoughts aside, Diana gently placed Edric in his crib. She straightened her sapphire dress, a mask of regality settling over her features. The dragon queen would attend to her duties, but a tiny ember of defiance, sparked by the lullaby and her son's innocent trust, flickered within her. Emerging from the nursery, Diana stepped back into the world of courtly intrigue and political machinations. But the memory of the lullaby, a melody of a world where loyalty and courage held a different meaning, lingered in her heart, a silent promise yet to be defined. Chapter 3. Days bled into each other, a monotonous rhythm punctuated only by the approaching execution of Sir Gareth. The castle buzzed with an undercurrent of tension. Servants scurried about with nervous glances, their whispers growing bolder with every passing hour. Even the normally stoic guard seemed to carry a weight of unease on their shoulders. Diana, however, maintained a facade of icy indifference. She performed her queenly duties with practiced efficiency, attending council meetings, receiving petitioners, and overseeing the elaborate preparations for the upcoming visit of the dignitaries from the neighboring kingdom of Ethel. Behind the mask, however, a storm raged within her. Gareth's defiant words echoed in her mind, a constant reminder of the growing discontent amongst the populace. The king, oblivious to the simmering unrest, reveled in the prospect of the Ethelian alliance, convinced it would solidify his power and pave the way for further territorial expansion. One evening, as Diana retired to her chambers, a cloaked figure emerged from the shadows. It was Tryphena, her usually composed demeanor replaced by a mixture of fear and determination. "Your Majesty," she whispered, her voice barely above a hiss, "there is something you must see." Diana's curiosity piqued. Tryphena had never defied protocol in such a manner. With a silent nod, she followed the handmaiden down a series of hidden passages, away from the watchful eyes of the court. They arrived at a concealed chamber, its only light source a single flickering candle. On the rough-hewn walls, crude symbols had been etched. Diana recognized them, symbols of rebel lion, used by a clandestine group known as the Crimson Rose. Tryphena pointed to a message scrawled beneath the symbols. It spoke of an uprising brewing amongst the commoners, fueled by the king's oppressive taxes and the upcoming execution of Sir Gareth. The message concluded with a chilling line: "The dragon's fire can be extinguished. The rose will bloom in its ashes." The weight of the revelation pressed down on Diana. The whispers of dissent were not mere disgruntled murmurs, they were a burgeoning rebel lion. Fear, cold and sharp, snaked through her. But alongside it, a flicker of something else arose, a sliver of understanding, perhaps even a hint of sympathy. These were not simply rebellious rabble-rousers, they were people desperate for a change, for a ruler who understood their plight. Looking at Tryphena, Diana saw not just her loyal handmaiden, but a woman who, like her, harbored a growing unease with the current regime. In that shared moment, a silent pact was formed. Diana, the Dragon Queen, would have to make a choice. Would she remain a symbol of fear and oppression, or would she find a way to bridge the growing chasm between the crown and the people? Chapter 4. The arrival of the Ethelian delegation shattered the tense silence that had gripped Obsidian Castle. A grand procession, shimmering with gold and vibrant banners, snaked its way through the castle gates. King Edgar, puffed with pride, led the way, his booming laughter echoing off the ancient stone walls. Diana, her emerald eyes narrowed beneath a jeweled crown, walked beside him, a picture of regal composure. At the head of the Ethelian delegation stood Queen Elera, a woman whose beauty was as sharp and polished as a viper's scales. Her smile never quite reached her eyes, a constant reminder of the rumored ruthlessness that had earned her the moniker the White Serpent. The following days were a whirlwind of courtly engagements. Lavish feasts were held, glittering with gold and overflowing with exotic delicacies. Bards sang of heroic deeds and glorious battles, their melodies masking the growing unease that permeated the castle. Behind the scenes, however, a different dance unfolded. Diana, ever the keen observer, noted the subtle tension between King Edgar's boisterous enthusiasm and Queen Elera's veiled pronouncements. The proposed alliance, it seemed, wasn't as straightforward as it initially appeared. The Ethelians spoke of mutual support, but Diana saw a hunger in their eyes, a desire for expansion that mirrored her own husband's ambitions. One evening, during a private audience with Queen Elera, Diana's suspicions were confirmed. Elera, her smile finally gone, spoke in measured tones of a joint military campaign against a neighboring kingdom. In return for Ethel's support, she demanded a sizable chunk of Obsidian Castle's territory. Diana's blood ran cold. This wasn't an alliance, it was a prelude to war. The image of the Crimson Rose's message flashed in her mind: the dragon's fire can be extinguished. The rose will bloom in its ashes. Was this the war their message alluded to? Was Ethel not a savior, but a predator in its own right? A fierce internal battle raged within her. Loyalty to her husband, the king, was ingrained in her very being. Yet, the thought of plunging the kingdom into a bloody conflict fueled by greed sickened her. She saw a reflection of her own internal struggle in Queen Elera's eyes, a woman caught between duty and ambition. Suddenly, the weight of Sir Gareth's execution, scheduled for the following day, pressed down on her. The thought of taking an innocent life on the eve of a potential war that could claim countless more felt unbearable. That night, as the castle slept, Diana made a decision. It was a decision fraught with danger, a gamble that could cost her everything. She would find a way to prevent the execution, to buy herself time to unravel the true intentions of the Ethelians and, perhaps, find a way to quell the rebel lion before it consumed the kingdom. Chapter 5. Night-cloaked obsidian castle in an inky darkness, broken only by the flickering torches lining the ramparts. Diana, her crimson robes blending with the shadows, moved with a swiftness that belied her regal bearing. She was on a mission, a desperate gamble born from a night of agonizing contemplation. Her destination, the dungeon where Sir Gareth awaited his execution. Tryphena, her loyal confidant, trailed behind, her face etched with worry. Guards were a constant threat, and the punishment for defying the king's decree was swift and brutal. They reached the cell door, its heavy iron bars casting grotesque shadows on the damp walls. With trembling hands, Tryphena produced a set of lockpicks, acquired at great risk. The scraping of metal against metal echoed in the oppressive silence. Finally, with a satisfying click, the lock yielded. Diana pushed the door open, a wave of stale air washing over her. Inside, huddled on a pile of straw, sat Sir Gareth. His face was gaunt, lit only by the flickering torchlight from the hallway. A flicker of surprise, followed by resignation, crossed his eyes as he saw the Queen. "Your Majesty," he rasped, his voice hoarse from disuse. "I did not expect." "There's no time for explanations," Diana cut him off, her voice low and urgent. "The execution is postponed. For now." Gareth's brow furrowed. "Postponed? There's a plot brewing," Diana revealed, her voice barely a whisper. "An alliance with Ethel that could plunge the kingdom into war. I need your help to unravel it." Gareth's initial surprise morphed into a spark of interest. Here was a chance for redemption, a way to serve his kingdom beyond the executioner's block. "What do you need me to do?" he asked, a newfound determination hardening his voice. "You are a man of loyalty and reason," Diana explained. "You understand the king's ambitions, perhaps better than anyone. I need you to observe, to gather information about the Ethelian delegation. Their true intentions, their plans, anything that could help us avoid this war." Gareth nodded, understanding dawning in his eyes. "I can do that, but what about the execution? They won't simply forget about it." "I'll handle the king," Diana said, a steely glint in her emerald eyes. "I'll find a way to appease his anger, at least for now." Leaving Gareth with a waterskin and a sliver of hope, Diana and Tryphena retreated back into the night. The immediate danger was averted, but a far greater battle loomed on the horizon. Diana, the Dragon Queen, had chosen a perilous path, walking a tightrope between loyalty and rebel lion. The fate of the kingdom now hinged on her ability to navigate a web of deceit, unravel the truth about the Ethelian alliance, and perhaps, even find a way to quell the rising flames of rebel lion before they consumed everything in their path. Chapter 6. The news of Sir Gareth's reprieve sent shockwaves through the castle. Whispers, carried on the very wind that howled around Obsidian Castle, morphed from tales of an imminent execution to murmurs of a powerful queen defying the king's will. Diana, however, had little time to bask in the surprise she had caused. King Edgar, upon learning of the postponed execution, erupted in fury. His thunderous bellow echoed through the grand hall, shaking the very tapestries on the walls. "Treason!" he roared, spittle flying as he glared at Diana. "You dare defy my command?" Diana met his gaze, her emerald eyes unwavering. "Your Majesty," she began, her voice calm despite the storm raging around her, "new information has come to light. There are discrepancies in the details of the Ethelian alliance." The king's bellow subsided, replaced by a grudging curiosity. "Discrepancies? Explain yourself." Diana proceeded to recount a fabricated tale of a coded message intercepted from the Ethelians, hinting at potential betrayal. It was a lie, a gamble fueled by desperation, but it bought her the time she needed. The king, ever suspicious, was easily swayed. He ordered an investigation, delaying the celebration of the alliance and casting a shadow of doubt over Queen Elaire's intentions. Meanwhile, Sir Gareth, freed from his cell but confined to a secluded chamber within the castle, began his covert operation. He observed the Ethelian delegation with a hawk-like focus, piecing together information gleaned from overheard conversations and subtle gestures. He discovered a hidden map tucked away in an ambassador's cloakroom, revealing a planned invasion route that contradicted the official assurances of mutual defense. One moonlit night, while following Queen Elaire through the castle gardens, Gareth overheard a hushed conversation between her and a cloaked figure. The voice belonged to a high-ranking Ethelian military commander, and the conversation confirmed Diana's suspicions. The alliance was a sham, a prelude to a surprise attack on Obsidian Castle. Gareth knew he had to act. He slipped away from the gardens and, using hidden passages known only to a select few, reached Diana's chambers. Bursting through the door, breathless and urgent, he relayed the information he had gathered. Diana listened intently, the weight of his words settling on her like a physical blow. Betrayal, not just from Ethel, but perhaps even closer to home. Could the cloaked figure Gareth had seen be someone within the castle, someone feeding information to the enemy? A horrifying realization dawned on her. The symbol of the Crimson Rose, the symbol of Rebel Lion, was eerily similar to a signet ring worn by a trusted advisor to the king, Lord Bertram. A cold dread filled her. Was the Rebel Lion not a reaction to the king's tyranny, but a carefully orchestrated manipulation by Ethel? With this new revelation, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The king's paranoia, the growing discontent amongst the populace, the sudden alliance with Ethel, it was all a meticulously crafted web to destabilize the kingdom from within. Diana and Gareth locked eyes, a silent understanding passing between them. The threat was far greater than they had initially imagined. They weren't just facing a war, they were facing a meticulously planned coup d'état. The future of the kingdom, and perhaps their own lives, hung in the balance. The Dragon Queen, the flames of defiance burning brighter within her, knew she had to act swiftly and decisively. But how? How could she expose the Ethelian treachery, quell the brewing Rebel Lion, and all the while, navigate the treacherous waters of her own court, where even the closest advisors could be harboring deadly secrets? Chapter 7. Sleep was a luxury Diana could no longer afford. Fueled by a potent cocktail of adrenaline and dread, she paced the confines of her chambers. Gareth's revelation about Lord Bertram's potential involvement with the Crimson Rose had thrown her into a vortex of suspicion. The man had been a trusted advisor to the king for years, his loyalty seemingly beyond reproach. Yet, the weight of the evidence, the signet ring, the very symbol of the Rebel Lion, gnawed at her. Was Bertram a traitor, a puppet master pulling the strings of discontent, or was he simply a victim of circumstance, unknowingly manipulated by Ethel? The answer, Diana knew, held the key to unraveling the entire conspiracy. She needed proof, irrefutable evidence to expose Bertram and the Ethelians before it was too late. Dawn broke, painting the sky with streaks of pink and orange, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within the castle walls. Diana summoned Tryphena, her most trusted confidant. The handmaiden arrived, her face etched with worry, but her eyes resolute. Tryphena, Diana began, her voice low but firm, I need your help in a delicate matter. We need to search Lord Bertram's quarters, discreetly, and without arousing suspicion. Tryphena's eyes widened in surprise. Searching a high-ranking advisor's quarters was not a task undertaken lightly, but the urgency in Diana's voice left no room for argument. Of course, Your Majesty, she replied, her voice unwavering. But how will we gain access? We won't, Diana revealed, a sly smile playing on her lips. We'll create a distraction. The plan was audacious, a risky gambit that hinged on theatrics and deception. Diana, clad in a simple gown, requested an audience with Queen Elaire. She feigned illness, claiming a sudden bout of food poisoning and requesting the Ethelian queen's renowned herbal remedies. Elaire, ever suspicious, agreed with a hint of barely concealed satisfaction. Diana knew she was thrilled at the prospect of the Obsidian Queen being incapacitated, especially at such a crucial juncture. The remedies arrived, a concoction brewed by Tryphena, not with healing herbs, but with a potent sleep-inducing powder. Diana, with a practiced hand, slipped the powder into a jeweled goblet meant for Elaire. As the Ethelian queen sipped the potion, a flicker of triumph crossed Diana's face. Meanwhile, Tryphena, disguised as a visiting healer, entered Elaire's chambers on the pretext of checking on the queen's well-being. While Elaire drifted off to a deep sleep, Tryphena and a cloaked figure Gareth, disguised as a servant, conducted a swift but thorough search of the quarters. Their efforts were rewarded. Hidden within a secret compartment in Elaire's desk, they found a rolled-up scroll. Unfurling it, they discovered irrefutable proof of Ethel's treachery, detailed battle plans, coded messages with Lord Bertram's signet ring as the seal, and a map highlighting a secret passage leading directly into the heart of the Obsidian Castle. With the evidence in hand, Diana knew the time for subterfuge was over. She summoned her most loyal guards, the ones who had served under her father and remained untainted by courtly politics. They arrived, faces grim but resolute, ready to follow their dragon queen. Diana stormed into the king's chambers, Gareth and Tryphena flanking her. The king, roused from a drunken stupor by the commotion, stared at his wife with a mixture of confusion and irritation. Ignoring his protests, Diana laid out the evidence, the scroll with its damning proof, before him. Gareth recounted his encounter with Ilaire and the cloaked figure, confirming Diana's suspicions about Lord Bertram. The king's face paled as he absorbed the truth. His trusted adviser, a viper in his midst. Betrayal, it seemed, ran deeper than he had ever imagined. With a swift and decisive gesture, Diana ordered the arrest of Lord Bertram. The guards, long suspicious of the adviser's increasing influence, moved with alacrity. The news of the Ethelian treachery and Lord Bertram's arrest spread like wildfire through the castle. The whispers of rebel lion, fueled by the Crimson Rose, morphed into a roar of outrage against the traitors. Diana addressed the court, her voice brimming with a newfound strength. She exposed Ethel's duplicity, their plans for conquest disguised as an alliance. She acknowledged the discontent within. Chapter 8. The revelation of Ethel's treachery sent shockwaves through the castle. Disbelief and anger crackled in the air, momentarily silencing the whispers of rebel lion. King Edgar, his face flushed with shame and fury, roared accusations at the unconscious Queen Ilaire, guarded by Diana's loyal soldiers. Diana, however, knew there was no time for recriminations. Ethel's attack could be imminent, and the kingdom's defenses had been compromised by Lord Bertram's betrayal. Addressing the assembled court, her voice steely and firm, she outlined the details of the planned invasion. Ethel planned to utilize a secret passage within these very walls, she revealed, gesturing towards a map projected on the Grand Hall wall. They intended to strike at the heart of our defenses while we celebrated their supposed alliance. A collective gasp went through the room. Fear mingled with a newfound respect for the queen who had uncovered the plot. Turning to the seasoned commander of the royal guard, she issued a series of rapid-fire commands. Seal the passage. Double the patrols on the ramparts. Alert our allies in the neighboring kingdoms. We prepare for war. The court, shaken but resolute, sprang into action. The once luxurious halls of Obsidian Castle echoed with the clang of armor and the hurried footsteps of soldiers. Diana, her emerald eyes flashing with determination, worked alongside them, her regal demeanor replaced by a warrior queen's focus. News of the Ethelian treachery and the impending attack filtered down to the city nestled beneath the castle walls. The whispers of rebel lion transformed into a rallying cry. Blacksmiths toiled day and night, forging weapons. Able-bodied men and women, inspired by the queen's bravery and the threat to their homes, volunteered to join the defense. The city, once simmering with discontent, now pulsed with a fierce unity. Meanwhile, within the dungeons, a tense drama unfolded. Lord Bertram, stripped of his power and dignity, awaited his fate. Diana, her crimson robes billowing as she entered the dank cell, stood before him, her expression a mask of icy fury. Betrayal, she spat, the word dripping with venom. You, who basked in the king's trust, plotted our downfall. What drove you, Bertram? Greed? Ambition? Bertram, his face pale and drawn, met her gaze with a flicker of defiance. The king's paranoia, his thirst for war, blinded him to the true needs of the people, he rasped. I saw an opportunity to bring stability, even if it meant forging a new alliance. Diana scoffed. Stability built on lies and bloodshed? You call that an alliance? Bertram remained silent, his defiance crumbling under the weight of her words. He, like the king, had been blinded by ambition, both men failing to see the suffering they were inflicting on their own people. Shaking her head in disappointment, Diana turned to leave. You will stand trial for your crimes, she declared, her voice leaving no room for argument. But the true battle lies ahead. Emerging from the dungeon, Diana walked towards the ramparts, overlooking the city preparing for war. The setting sun cast long shadows, painting the bustling streets in an orange glow. From this vantage point, she saw not just the fear in the people's eyes, but also the resolve. They were the Dragon Queen's people, and she, their protector, would stand beside them. A distant horn echoed, a sound that sent shivers down her spine. It was the Ethelian war horn, a signal of their arrival. The battle for Obsidian Castle, a battle for the very fate of the kingdom, had begun. Standing tall on the ramparts, Diana surveyed the approaching Ethelian army. Fear threatened to consume her, but she pushed it down. She was the Dragon Queen, and in the face of adversity, dragons rise. Raising her sword, its hilt a glinting emerald dragon, she rallied her people. For the kingdom, for our homes, let the flames of our defiance scorch the invaders. Her roar, echoing across the battlefield, ignited a fire within the hearts of her defenders. As the Ethelian army surged forward, they met a wall of steel and unwavering determination. The battle raged, a whirlwind of clashing swords, screams of pain, and the relentless pounding of drums. Diana, a whirlwind of crimson fury, led the charge, her emerald eyes blazing with the fire of a dragon. This wasn't just a battle for territory, it was a fight for their very way of life. And Diana, the dragon. Chapter 9. The clash of steel echoed through the night, a cacophony that rivaled the howling wind. Obsidian Castle, once a symbol of power and grandeur, now stood as a battle-scarred testament to the fierce struggle raging within its walls. Smoke billowed from burning siege towers, and the metallic tang of blood hung heavy in the air. Diana, her once pristine crimson robes now stained with grime and blood, fought with the ferocity of a cornered dragon. Her emerald eyes, usually glinting with regal authority, blazed with an unrelenting determination. Each swing of her emerald dragon-hilt sword felt like a righteous blow against treachery and deceit. Around her, the tide of battle ebbed and flowed. The Ethelian soldiers, clad in gleaming silver armor, pressed their attack with relentless force. But Diana's loyal defenders, fueled by a newfound sense of purpose and the Queen's unwavering leadership, held their ground. The city below, once a bustling haven, had become a battlefield itself. Smoke rose from burning houses, casting an eerie glow on the cobblestone streets. But amidst the chaos, a different kind of fire burned, the fire of defiance. Ordinary men and women, armed with makeshift weapons and fueled by a desperate love for their homes, joined the fight. On the battlements, Tryphena, her once calm demeanor replaced by a warrior's focus, fought alongside the guards. Her sword danced with deadly precision, deflecting blows and delivering swift counterattacks. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm, a mixture of fear and determination. Today, she wasn't just protecting the Queen, she was protecting her family, her city, her future. Just as hope began to flicker, a thunderous roar echoed through the night. A section of the castle wall, weakened by Ethelian siege engines, crumbled, creating a gaping hole in the defense. A wave of panic surged through the defenders, a momentary hesitation that could spell disaster. Diana saw the breach, saw the Ethelian soldiers surge forward, their eyes filled with a predatory glint. She knew then that she had to act, to do something to rally her people, to turn the tide of the battle. With a battle cry that echoed through the night, Diana charged towards the breach. Her loyal guards, inspired by their queen's bravery, followed suit. The clash that ensued was brutal, a desperate struggle for every inch of ground. Diana fought like a woman possessed, her sword a blur of emerald light. In the heat of the battle, she locked eyes with the commander of the Ethelian forces, a hulking figure clad in silver armor. Their blades met in a clash of steel, sending sparks flying. Diana fought with everything she had, channeling her rage, her anger, her fear into each strike. The battle became personal, a duel between the protectors and the invaders. The fight seemed to go on for an eternity, but Diana refused to yield. With a final, desperate lunge, she disarmed the Ethelian commander, sending his sword clattering to the ground. His eyes widened in surprise, and before he could react, Diana's sword found its mark. A collective gasp went through both sides as the Ethelian commander crumpled to the ground, his face contorted in a mixture of pain and disbelief. The remaining Ethelian soldiers, their morale shattered, faltered. Seeing their leader fall, they hesitated, their charge losing its momentum. Diana, seizing the opportunity, roared a challenge that cut through the night air. For the Dragon Queen, for Obsidian Castle, drive them back. Her rallying cry ignited a renewed fervor in the defenders. The remaining Ethelian soldiers were met with a renewed wave of steel and fury. They were pushed back, their once organized attack devolving into a desperate scramble for survival. Finally, with a demoralized cry, the Athenian forces turned tail and retreated. The din of battle slowly subsided, replaced by the groans of the wounded and the ragged gasps of the exhausted. Diana, her body shaking with exertion and adrenaline, slumped against a battlement. Looking around her, she saw the devastation of the night-fallen comrades, blood-stained stone, and the smoke that still clung stubbornly to the air. But amidst the wreckage, she saw something else, a city that still stood, a people who had defied the odds. The battle for Obsidian Castle was won, but at a heavy cost. Yet, as the sun began to rise, painting the sky with streaks of pink and gold, a sense of hope flickered within Diana. They had survived, they had defied an enemy, and perhaps, they had even found a new kind of strength. Chapter 10. The aftermath of the battle resembled a scene from a nightmare. The once pristine streets of Obsidian City were littered with debris, the air thick with the stench of burnt wood and spilled blood. Amidst the destruction, citizens emerged from their hideaways, weary but alive. Relief mixed with grief hung heavy in the air. Diana, her crimson robes tattered and blood-stained, moved through the ruins, the weight of the battle heavy on her shoulders. She spoke with the wounded, offering words of comfort and gratitude. She conferred with her advisors, strategizing the rebuilding efforts and the fate of the captured Athenian soldiers. One by one, the court officials presented a grim tally of the losses. Among the fallen were brave citizens, loyal guards, and even Tryphena, her devoted handmaiden. Diana felt a pang of grief pierce her heart, a reminder of the true cost of victory. Returning to the castle, Diana found King Edgar in his chambers, a broken man. The arrogance that had fueled his decisions had been replaced by a hollow despair. He confessed his blindness to Ethel's deceit, his neglect of the needs of his people. The kingdom needs a strong leader, Diana, he rasped, his voice hoarse. One who understands the responsibility that comes with power. One who can heal the wounds inflicted by my folly. Diana gazed at him, a king stripped of his illusions. There was no anger in her heart, only a weary acceptance. The kingdom is wounded, your majesty, she replied, her voice firm but devoid of accusation. But it is not broken. We will rebuild, not just the castle walls, but the trust we have shattered. News of King Edgar's abdication spread quickly through the court and the city. The people, though wary, were not unhappy. They had witnessed Diana's strength and leadership during the battle. For the first time, whispers of a dragon queen weren't laced with fear, they held a hint of admiration, a flicker of faith. Days turned into weeks, and the city buzzed with activity. Citizens, side by side with soldiers, cleared debris, repaired buildings, and tended to the injured. A sense of collective purpose had replaced the earlier discord. The crimson rose, once a symbol of rebel lion, transformed into a symbol of hope and unity. People who had once felt alienated from the crown now wore its emblem with pride. One day, a delegation from the neighboring kingdoms arrived, bearing condolences and offers of aid. Queen Elea, shorn of her Athenian arrogance, stood before them, a humble prisoner. Terms for peace were discussed, reparations promised. The seeds of a renewed alliance, built on respect and understanding, were sown. Finally, the day arrived for Diana's coronation. Clad in a new crimson gown, the symbol of the Dragon Queen emblazoned on her chest, she stood before her people. Gone was the image of a distant, aloof monarch. In her eyes, a steely resolve mingled with a newfound warmth. Raising her hand, she addressed the crowd. Her voice, once commanding, now held a note of vulnerability, of shared experience. We have faced a great darkness, she began, but from the ashes, we rise anew. We are no longer a kingdom divided, but a force united. We are the dragon's flame, fierce and resilient. A roar of approval rose from the crowd. It wasn't just a cheer for their queen, it was a declaration of their own strength, their own unwavering spirit. Diana, the Dragon Queen, had not just saved her kingdom, she had forged a new one, built on the ashes of war, on the foundation of shared sacrifice and a renewed sense of purpose. The future remained uncertain, but as she surveyed her people, their faces etched with determination and hope, she knew they would face it together. The Dragon Queen and her people, forever bound by fire and steel, would rise from the ashes, stronger, more united, and ready to write a new chapter in the kingdom's history. Chapter 11. Months had passed since Queen Diana's coronation. The scars of the Ethelian invasion were slowly healing, but the memory of the battle remained etched in the minds of the people. Obsidian Castle, though still bearing the marks of war, hummed with a renewed energy. Diana, the Dragon Queen, ruled with a firm but compassionate hand, her focus on rebuilding not just the city walls, but the trust between the crown and the people. One crisp autumn morning, as the first frost kissed the ground, a lone rider galloped through the castle gates. Dust billowed around the cloaked figure, obscuring their features. The rider approached the guards, tension radiating from their posture. "Urgent message for Queen Diana," the rider rasped, their voice muffled by the cloak. From the north. The guards, wary of strangers, exchanged a glance. But the urgency in the rider's voice, a hint of desperation that cut through their training, compelled them to usher the figure into the castle. News of the rider's arrival reached Diana while she was in the council chambers, discussing trade agreements with a visiting ambassador. Excusing herself, she hurried to the designated meeting room, her curiosity piqued. The cloaked figure stood with their back to her, their head bowed. As Diana entered, the figure turned, revealing a weathered face framed by a mess of windswept brown hair. It was a woman, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "Who are you?" Diana asked, her voice calm but firm. "I am Anya," the woman replied, her voice hoarse. "A messenger from the Northern Watch." Anya proceeded to unfold a tale that sent a shiver down Diana's spine. The once peaceful northern frontier, a buffer zone between Obsidian and the harsh wilder lands beyond, was no more. A new power, a ruthless tribe known as the Iron Horde, had risen from the icy wastelands. The Iron Horde, Anya explained, were led by a warlord called Ragnar, a man of immense strength and chilling brutality. They had already overrun several frontier settlements, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. The remaining settlements were holding on by a thread, desperately sending pleas for help. The council chamber, once buzzing with discussion, fell silent. The gravity of Anya's message hung heavy in the air. This wasn't a skirmish, it was a full-blown invasion. Diana, her emerald eyes narrowed, dismissed the ambassador and turned to her advisors. "We must act swiftly," she declared. "We cannot allow the Iron Horde to continue their rampage unchecked." "But Your Majesty," one advisor cautioned, his voice laced with worry, "our army is still recovering from the Ethel War. Are we truly ready for another conflict?" "We may not be at full strength," Diana countered, her voice unwavering, "but we are not helpless either. The Iron Horde may be relentless, but we are the Dragon Queen's people, and we will not cower in fear." A tense debate erupted. Some advisors urged caution, advocating for diplomacy or seeking aid from neighboring kingdoms. Others, fueled by a desire for vengeance and a sense of duty to protect their borders, echoed Diana's call for action. In the end, Diana made her decision. She wouldn't ignore the pleas for help. She wouldn't wait for the Iron Horde to reach her doorstep. She would lead her people north, to face the enemy head-on. "We ride for the north at dawn," Diana declared. "Prepare the army. We will not stand by and watch our people suffer." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the castle courtyard, Diana stood on the ramparts, gazing towards the horizon where the North Star winked in the twilight sky. A pang of apprehension gnawed at her, but it was overshadowed by a fierce determination. She was the Dragon Queen, protector of her people, and in the face of this new threat, she would rise once more, a blaze of defiance against the encroaching darkness. The journey north would be long and perilous, but as Diana surveyed her loyal soldiers, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and newfound resolve, she knew they wouldn't face it alone. They were the dragon's flame, and in the coming storm, they would burn brighter than ever. Chapter 12. The wind howled like a banshee, whipping across the desolate plains as Diana and her army marched north. Gone were the verdant fields and bustling cities of the south. The landscape stretched before them, a vast expanse of snow-covered plains and jagged, snow-capped mountains. The sun, a pale disk in the frigid sky, offered little warmth. The biting wind stung exposed skin, and the relentless snow hampered their progress. Soldiers huddled together for meager comfort, their breath forming frosty clouds in the thin air. Despite the hardship, a quiet determination burned in their eyes. They were the Dragon Queen's champions, and they wouldn't falter. Days bled into weeks, marked by the rhythmic crunch of boots on snow and the endless expanse of white. Morale, initially high, began to dwindle. Supplies ran low, and whispers of doubt circulated amongst the ranks. Was their sacrifice in vain? Were they marching towards oblivion? One evening, as they camped beneath the star-dusted sky, Diana huddled with her advisors around a crackling fire. Her face, etched with fatigue, mirrored the growing anxieties within the army. A scout, his face pale and drawn, approached the group. "Your Majesty," he rasped, his voice barely audible over the howling wind. "We've spotted them. A scouting party from the Iron Horde. They seem to be heading south." A flicker of hope ignited in Diana's eyes. "Are they alone? Do we have a chance of engaging them here?" The scout shook his head. "There are too few of them for a full-fledged battle. But it's a sign. The Iron Horde is closer than we thought." Anya, the messenger from the Northern Watch, stepped forward, her voice laced with urgency. "They wouldn't send a scouting party unless they were planning a larger attack. We need to prepare for a siege." Diana nodded, steeling her resolve. "Then prepare we shall. Find higher ground, a defensible position. We will meet the Iron Horde head-on." The next sunrise revealed a desolate landscape, dominated by a towering, rocky outcrop. It wasn't ideal, but it was the only strategic advantage they could find. Soldiers, their faces grim but determined, worked tirelessly, fortifying the position with snow walls and makeshift shelters. Days turned into a tense waiting game. The only sounds that pierced the silence were the creaking of the wind and the nervous chatter of the soldiers. Then, on a day when the sun struggled to pierce the thick layer of clouds, a dark shape appeared on the horizon. It was a monstrous sight, a horde of warriors on monstrous, ice-horned beasts, their black armor glinting even in the dim light. Their banners, crude depictions of a snarling wolf against a blood-red background, fluttered in the wind. The Iron Horde had arrived. Diana stood atop the makeshift rampart, her crimson cloak billowing in the wind like a fiery flag. Fear threatened to consume her, but she pushed it down. She was the Dragon Queen, and her people were watching. Raising her sword, the emerald dragon glinting in the pale light, she roared a challenge that echoed across the frozen plains. "People of Obsidian, we stand here today for our homes, for our families, for our very way of life. The Iron Horde may be mighty, but we are the dragon's flame. We fight with the fury of the Dragon Queen herself. Let us show them what it means to defend our land." Her words ignited a fire in the hearts of her soldiers. They raised their weapons in a deafening roar, a collective defiance against the encroaching darkness. The battle for the frozen frontier had begun. Chapter 13. The first wave of the Iron Horde thundered across the snow-covered plains, a monstrous tide of black armor and monstrous beasts. Their guttural war cries echoed through the thin air, sending shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned soldiers. Diana, her heart pounding but her gaze unwavering, stood at the front lines. Her crimson cloak whipped around her like a storm cloud, the emerald dragon on her sword hilt glinting defiantly. Beside her, Anya, spear in hand, her eyes blazing with a fierce determination, mirrored the queen's resolve. The first clash was brutal. The Iron Horde warriors, clad in thick furs and wielding enormous axes, slammed into the obsidian line. Diana, a whirlwind of crimson and emerald, fought with the ferocity of a cornered dragon. Her sword sang a deadly song, each swing a promise of defiance. Around her, soldiers fought with a desperate courage, their blades ringing against the iron of their enemies. But the Iron Horde outnumbered them. The obsidian soldiers, exhausted from their long journey and hampered by the biting wind, were slowly pushed back. Despair threatened to engulf them, but Diana refused to let it win. Spotting a hulking figure clad in black iron armor leading the charge, a warrior of monstrous size, Diana recognized him from Anya's descriptions. Ragnar, the warlord of the Iron Horde. He towered over the battlefield, a monstrous axe dripping with blood held high. With a defiant roar, Diana charged towards him, weaving through the chaos like a crimson serpent. Ragnar turned, a cruel smile twisting his lips as he saw the lone figure approaching. He bellowed a challenge, his voice booming like thunder. "You are a fool to face me, little queen," he rasped, his voice dripping with disdain. Ignoring his taunt, Diana lunged forward, her blade a blur of emerald light. Ragnar met her strike with his enormous axe, the force of the impact sending a tremor through the ground. Diana gritted her teeth, her anger fueling her strength. The battle between queen and warlord became the focal point of the fight, a microcosm of the larger struggle. Diana fought with the speed and precision of a trained warrior, but Ragnar matched her blow for blow, his raw strength a formidable challenge. As they clashed, Diana saw a flicker of vulnerability in Ragnar's eyes. He relied on brute force, leaving openings in his defense. Seizing this opportunity, Diana parried a blow and spun around him, landing a precise strike on his leg. With a roar of pain, Ragnar stumbled back. Seeing their leader falter, the Iron Horde's momentum wavered. Diana used this momentary advantage to her benefit. Raising her sword high, she rallied her remaining soldiers. "For Obsidian! For our homes! Drive them back!" she roared, her voice echoing across the battlefield. Inspired by their queen's bravery, the Obsidian soldiers fought with renewed vigor. They pushed back against the Iron Horde, their defiance hardening into a wall of steel. The tide slowly began to turn, but the battle raged on. The wind howled, carrying the sounds of clashing steel and screams of pain. The snow turned crimson under the onslaught of blood, gruesome evidence of the fierce struggle. Just as hope began to flicker, a thunderous roar shook the ground. From the flank, a new force charged into the battle, their banners bearing the sigil of the stag, reinforcements from a neighboring kingdom, responding to Diana's desperate pleas before her departure. The arrival of the new allies turned the tide conclusively. The Iron Horde, their ranks thinned and morale shattered, broke formation and retreated. Their guttural war cries were replaced by desperate yells as they scattered across the snow. The battle was won, but at a heavy cost. Many brave soldiers from both sides lay dead on the frozen ground. As the survivors surveyed the carnage, a heavy silence descended upon the battlefield. Diana, exhaustion etched on her face, knelt beside Anya, who lay cradling a wounded soldier. Looking up at Diana, Anya's face held a mixture of relief and grief. "They are gone," Anya whispered, her voice hoarse. "But the scars will remain." Diana nodded, her gaze sweeping across the battlefield. Victory tasted bittersweet. They had defended their land, but the cost of freedom was high. As the sun peeped through the clouds, casting a pale glow on the snow-covered battlefield, Diana knew one thing for certain. The Iron Horde might be defeated, but the war for their future had just begun. Chapter 14. Weeks had passed since the brutal battle on the frozen frontier. The scars, both physical and emotional, were slow to heal. The once bustling castle halls echoed with a somber silence, a stark contrast to the joyous celebration that had followed the Aethelian victory. Diana, her crimson robes seeming a shade duller, sat in the royal library, surrounded by scrolls and maps. The weight of her crown felt heavier than ever. The battle had been a tactical victory, but it had come at a terrible price. Anya, the brave messenger from the north, had succumbed to her wounds, leaving a void in Diana's heart. A soft rapping on the library door startled Diana from her thoughts. "Enter," she called out, her voice raspy. The door creaked open, and Gareth, his face etched with concern, stepped inside. He had played a crucial role in the battle, his strategic mind proving invaluable in outmaneuvering the Iron Horde. "Your Majesty," he began, bowing his head slightly, "I bring news from the north." A spark of curiosity flickered in Diana's eyes. "News? Is it another attack?" Gareth shook his head. "No, Your Majesty. It seems the remnants of the Iron Horde have retreated further north, beyond the reach of our patrols. But there's more." He hesitated, then continued, "An envoy has arrived, bearing a message from Warlord Ragnar." Diana's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "An envoy? This was unexpected. What is the message?" He seeks peace," Gareth replied, his voice laced with disbelief. "He acknowledges his defeat and proposes a truce." Diana contemplated this for a long moment. Peace? After the devastation they had inflicted? Part of her yearned for a respite, a chance to rebuild. But another part, a part fueled by anger and grief, clamored for vengeance. "What are his terms?" she finally asked. Gareth produced a scroll and handed it to Diana. She unfurled it, her emerald eyes scanning the message with a critical gaze. Ragnar's terms were surprisingly simple: a neutral border zone between the Iron Horde and Obsidian, with free trade and passage for merchants. "It seems almost too easy," Diana muttered, her voice laced with suspicion. "What is his true motive?" "That's the question, Your Majesty," Gareth agreed. "Perhaps he has suffered heavier losses than he lets on. Or maybe he's just biding his time for another attack." They discussed the message for hours, debating the merits of peace versus the risks of deception. Finally, Diana made up her mind. "We cannot allow them to rebuild their strength," she declared, her voice firm. "But neither can we afford another war so soon." Anya's words echoed in her mind. The scars would remain. She needed her people to heal, not to fight another grueling battle. "We will send an envoy of our own," Diana continued, a new strategy forming in her mind. "Someone who can assess the true state of the Iron Horde and negotiate terms that truly benefit both sides." Gareth's eyes widened in understanding. "Someone who is skilled in diplomacy, yet strong enough to command respect." Diana smiled, a hint of her old fire flickering in her emerald eyes. "Someone who is not afraid to dance with dragons." The choice was clear. She would not simply accept peace, she would forge it, on her own terms. The scars of the battle would remain, a constant reminder of the price of freedom. But amidst the ashes, a new kind of strength had been forged, a strength that combined the Dragon Queen's ferocity with a leader's wisdom. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the castle walls, Diana stood on the balcony, her gaze fixed on the distant north. Peace was a gamble, but it was one she was willing to take. The journey ahead would be fraught with danger, but she, the Dragon Queen, would face it head-on. For her people, for her kingdom, and for the hope of a brighter future. Chapter 15. The crisp autumn air whipped at Ilaire's face as she stood on the windswept plains, her once finely woven Ethelian silks now replaced by a worn traveling cloak. Gone were the days of opulent palaces and scheming courtly life. Now, she served as Diana's envoy, tasked with navigating the treacherous political landscape of the Iron Horde. Ilaire, stripped of her former arrogance, felt a tremor of fear as she surveyed the gathering. Hulking Iron Horde warriors, clad in thick furs and bearing brutal weapons, surrounded a central figure, Ragnar, the warlord himself. His imposing stature and scarred face lived up to his fearsome reputation. Despite her apprehension, Ilaire squared her shoulders and approached the warlord, offering a respectful nod. "Ragnar," she began, her voice firm but devoid of aggression, "I come as an envoy of Queen Diana of Obsidian." Ragnar eyed her with a cold-blooded curiosity. "The Queen sends a woman to speak with a warrior," he rumbled, his voice dripping with a hint of amusement. Ilaire met his gaze unflinchingly. "Queen Diana sends one who understands the costs of war," she countered. "She seeks peace, not further bloodshed." Ragnar let out a guttural laugh, the sound echoing across the plains. "Peace? After what your queen did to my people? And what did your people do to the peaceful villages of the north?" Ilaire countered. "Peace will not erase the past, but it can prevent a future stained with blood." A tense silence descended upon the gathering as Ragnar pondered her words. The Iron Horde warriors shifted uneasily, the memory of their defeat still fresh. "Peace is a fragile thing," Ragnar finally spoke, his voice quieter now. "What does your queen offer?" Ilaire explained the proposed terms, a neutral zone established between the two territories, free trade for merchants, and the return of captured soldiers. Ragnar listened intently, his expression unreadable. The negotiations were long and arduous. Ilaire found herself constantly walking a tightrope, balancing between firmness and concession. Ragnar, a shrewd negotiator himself, challenged every point, testing her resolve. But Ilaire, fueled by the responsibility entrusted to her by Diana and the yearning for peace after witnessing the devastation firsthand, held her ground. She used her knowledge of politics, honed during her years in the Ethelian court, to anticipate Ragnar's moves and counter them with well-reasoned arguments. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Ragnar softened. He acknowledged the losses on both sides, the need for his people to rebuild. He agreed to the proposed terms, with a few minor modifications. Relief washed over Ilaire, a warmth spreading through her chest despite the biting wind. The first tentative steps towards peace had been taken. As she prepared to leave, Ragnar stopped her. "Tell your queen," he said, his voice gruff, "Ragnar never forgets a debt. Consider this peace a chance to prove your worth." Ilaire nodded, her eyes locked on his. "And tell your warlord," she countered, her voice unwavering, "the Dragon Queen does not back down from a challenge." The journey back to Obsidian was filled with a newfound optimism. Ilaire knew the journey towards lasting peace wouldn't be easy. Mistrust ran deep, and old wounds wouldn't heal overnight. But a crucial step had been taken. As Alara finally entered the castle gates, greeted with relieved smiles and grateful greetings, she knew her mission had been successful. She had not just brought back the promise of peace, she had brought back hope. Queen Diana, the Dragon Queen, had proven that even amidst the flames of war, diplomacy could take flight, a testament to the strength that resided not just in wielding a sword, but in the wisdom to seek a better future. The scars of battle might remain, but a new chapter had begun. A chapter where the Dragon Queen and her people, forever marked by the trials they had faced, would strive to rebuild their kingdom and forge a future where peace and prosperity would reign. Epilogue. Years had passed since the tentative peace treaty with the Iron Horde. The scars of war were slowly fading, replaced by a cautious optimism that hummed through the streets of Obsidian City. Trade flourished, with merchants from both sides cautiously venturing across the established neutral zone. The once fortified borders now echoed with the lively chatter of bartering and the clinking of coins. Diana, her once fiery crimson robes replaced by a more regal blue, stood on the balcony of the castle, her gaze sweeping across the bustling city. The weight of the crown still sat heavy on her head, but there was a new lightness in her eyes. The years had tempered her, etching lines on her face but also adding a quiet strength. A young girl, barely taller than Diana's knee, tugged at her crimson cloak. It was Alara's daughter, Alara having found a new life in Obsidian, serving as an advisor to the queen. The girl's eyes, the same shade of emerald that mirrored Diana's own, shimmered with curiosity. "Queen Diana," the girl asked, her voice filled with a childlike wonder, "tell me again about the Dragon Queen." Diana smiled, the warmth reaching her eyes. She knelt before the girl, her voice softer now, yet still carrying the echo of her past battles. "The Dragon Queen," she began, "was a warrior, yes, but she was also a leader who understood that true strength lies not just in wielding a sword, but in protecting her people." She gestured towards the city, the bustling marketplace, the children playing in the park. "This, the peace and prosperity we enjoy now, this is the legacy of the Dragon Queen." The girl's eyes widened in awe. "But the Dragon Queen, wasn't she scary?" Diana chuckled, a gentle sound that carried across the balcony. "She could be," she admitted, "but even dragons learn to control their fire. They learn that sometimes, the most important battles are fought not with weapons, but with words, with reason, and with the hope for a better tomorrow." The girl pondered this for a moment, then nodded, a determined glint in her eyes. "So the Dragon Queen, she fought for peace." Diana smiled, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "Yes," she whispered, the wind carrying her words across the city, across the neutral zone, and perhaps, even reaching the ears of the warlord beyond. "The Dragon Queen fought for peace." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Diana stood tall, the city lights twinkling below like a promise of a brighter future. The scars of the past remained, a reminder of the battles fought and the sacrifices made. But amidst the embers of war, a new hope had been kindled. The hope for a kingdom, a people, and a Dragon Queen who dared to dream of a world where peace reigned supreme.